Now, one of the elements in drama that is not like theatre is we require to make people feel they are not being stared at. Actors have agreed to be stared at. Children have not agreed to be stared at. They are, but they have not agreed a contract. Teachers have agreed a contract to be stared at. I knew when Jane said, will you come along, I would be stared at, and was prepared to be stared at. I put my cameo on because it's more interesting than my face. You know, it's all part of it. So, this is one of the elements of the theatre element. Role uses sign, the heart of the theatre. In role, you are instantly in now time. Much theatre is taught as over their time. Supposing you were going to be, what if? Let's try it this way. This is over their time. But when a group of people walk in and find this rather odd object at the moment, which happens to be Jane, it's now time. There is an immediate potential encounter. Hardly any learning goes on in formal education in now time, because the instructor gets in the way. The person who knows is intermediary the whole time. The second thing about role, which is related with theatre, is that it has a tight central core. This woman is called Maid Marian today. She is not generally Maid Marian as a personality. She is designed for a very specific learning purpose. So she's very tightly controlled. She's controlled as much as a play. She can be controlled, I can be controlled. The thing we never have any control over is the responses of the people we teach. That is their right. So there must be freedom for their response and tightness in the concept. And if their freedom needs them to go many, many distant light years away from my design in helping them learn something, I will go by a loop line and keep returning to it. So they have long reins to get round, but this role is tight as a play is. So don't get the notion that, oh, it's only a person in a room, you can do anything you like. You cannot. Not if you are paid to teach, to modify behaviour in some way, to inform, to give learning experiences that people can master something that they are paying time about. They may not consciously know they're mastering that particular thing. I've already mentioned now time. The next element is, as in the theatre, Jane has agreed to be stared at. And she can create a very high focus through me, because I am important as well. But she's agreed to be stared at, she's in now time, and this high focus at very slow pace is what is going to matter in the particular areas we have an interest in today. So it's high energy at very slow pace. And of course, she's an interesting focus. Now, she might look odd to us, and of course a wimple isn't the best we could make, but it's the best good time for. Often when I was working in the hospital, she was not she, because I've not used Maid Marian that way. The role, any role I've ever created, whether it's a dog with a sore ear or what, never looks bizarre to people in hospitals, who frequently can look as bizarre as the role, because they may be holding a doll and talking to you through a doll, or they may be in all kinds of clothes, which is terrible, really. But often nurses have given up on it because it's too tiring to keep redressing them and so on. So, though she looks a bit peculiar to us, Usually roles don't look peculiar to people, no matter who the people are. I'm not just talking about people with special needs, because the whole setup is signing that this is a bit unusual anyway. Then there is the capacity in the role to challenge what people know, to add new areas to that knowledge. There are people who wear funny hats like this, for example, is an example of that. They immediately can respond. Immediately there is response. And if the response is to do nothing, it's still a response because they are presently there. They can induct people into special lines of inquiry. I can't, except through her, if I'm using this sort of role. And of course, they express concepts. Now, when we come on to Maid Marian, one of the concepts that we are going to express is travellers ought to think a bit before they leave. Because I'm assuming that you are working with people and only you know the levels of attainment they have. You can visualise them. I've always said that any role will work from what the hospital used to say, in a way, you know, I don't approve of this term, but it works, just for now. The very low achievers, what they call the low grade, to the very highest grade. The role will work, just as good literature does. So the role allows you to express a concept. Now, at the moment, she's not expressing traveller, because we haven't given her the travelling expressive things, but we shall later. And that is one of the important teaching elements that I would use in conceiving of Maid Marian. You ought to think a bit about why you're going and what you need. Whether you're going on holiday, or whether you've lost your home, because at some levels that might be it, or whether you're changing where you live, or whether you're just going to college and back, you better have to think a little bit. So the role must always express something of the concept without it having to be explained. If it can't explain itself, it's wrong. It isn't clean enough. It carries infinite capacity for subtlety. And we can't test this because we haven't got your course people here. But it has infinite capacity. It can deal in this way with the person at this side and this way with the person at this side. Because the person here is perceiving the range that is required of the role and feeding to the role the possibilities, because the role cannot do anything just alone unless this one moves away and says, take it, I trust you, you're all right, you can go on, I'm not neglecting you, but I'm leaving you to manage because you're going to be okay. And that is very important in this work, that there are times when the role relies on you and they must never be left, because they must not be intruded on. They must not be violated in any way whatsoever. The role is not an actor. The role is a presence for learning, controlled and secured by, in this case, me. When I turn my back on Jane, it would be to tell her, I'll watch out, I'll be back in a flash. There will be no violation of your role, your presence, your physique at all. I'll be there, but for the moment, you're on your own, you're okay. Everything's fine. So in the long run, the total responsibility for the security of the client and the role is mine. The facilitator is how I call it. The eye contact, the discourse, The timing of answers, the signing, the challenges to people are frequently have to be dictated by the role, because by the facilitator, because the role is vulnerable. Jane cannot leave her lifestyle. Jane's in the forest, alone, ill-equipped for a journey, needing great help, but the role must not be weak. Far too many people begin working role with a weak role, and they end up with a totally ineffective role. So though Jane is a little foolish in the forest, because she's innocent, that's all. She is not a weak woman. And it's quite horrendous when I see people take up this notion of role and they create such weakness. You think, well, why bother with her? And I've seen I remember horrendous circumstances. I remember a group of patient, middle-aged women in America who wanted to try role with some 6-year-olds, and 6-year-old Americans are, you know, and they were going to rob a Vietnamese, you see, a vulnerable boat lady. And I looked at her bag of rice, and I looked at her little hat on her back, you know, and I said, they'll walk all over her. Oh no, they said, she's such a nice person. I said, well, all I can say is be careful, watch her. Because she looks dim, and that's not fair to the Vietnamese boat people. And what's more, she looks like she didn't know how to use a wok. You know, I don't know whether they do use wok, but she had a wok and a bag of rice, and she didn't look like she could see her way anywhere. Well, these 6-year-olds come in, and of course, who's she? What's she want? You know, and so on. Now, you can't have it. It just isn't on. And in order to rescue that role, I had to bring in, and thank God there was one, a man that looked about 8 feet tall because he was so thin, and I dressed him as a samurai warrior. And I said, when those kids walk in today, you come in with your sword and you say, who's been making my wife cry? I said, I'll only need you 5 minutes, then you go back to your class, but I want it this way. You know, because that little lad in the front that has his neck turned round wants some responsibility. I said, and then give him your sword and say, look after her for me. By God, it worked. You know, I mean, the others sorted out, but it took a samurai warrior, pleading is no good, saying, oh well, look children, you shouldn't treat her like this, she's a poor boat lady. I mean, that's no good, it's just words. Anyway, I'm just warning you, if I hear there's been weak roles at the moment. Then there's the demand. There's the demand in the clients for slowly beginning to discriminate. Like, would it be better if we helped her this way, or said this, or do you think she looked a bit upset then? So gradually there is more and more subtlety and discrimination coming in the client. And of course the role is always in process of becoming. See, Maid Marian, at the moment, can fix a dilemma. She knows she has to get somewhere, because Robin has sent her a message. She doesn't know quite where that somewhere is, but she's no idiot. And she thought she'd need a horse. The trouble is the horse has run off, because a wimple, well, I haven't got a white horse. If I had a white horse, well, I could have had a white horse. I mean, you can have a horse roll, there's no problem about that, because you'll see in there's a unicorn roll. So you can have 4-legged beasts. But she's in process of becoming, because the clients have a say in how she becomes. So don't think of her as a fixed act, and she's not a fixed part. The person who is, the facilitator, you see, I've been retired a bit, the facilitator is helping the role become for the clients what they require of it. And so Jane is like, if you can think of a ship, a sailing ship with the sails slack, the facilitator is a sort of pilot, or the the steersman. The clients fill the sails, and Jane becomes to the level they need and the focus they need. And she may quite suddenly emerge as a different personality because she isn't acting a part. It's terribly essential that whoever you get to be in role, they don't need any experience apart from being breathing and alive and have living, with living experience. But they do require to realise they are demonstrating a response. They are not feeling it. They are understanding it, and they're demonstrating it. You see, and it depends what they demonstrate, depends on this one. So I might say, seems a funny thing to carry your hairbrush and your mirror hung on your arms. You'd think it'd get bashed about, wouldn't you? Now I'm really saying to Jane, just let's see these a bit clearly. And if people are going to come near, she may hear me say things that help her know whether the hands should look, I'm glad you're interested in my mirror, or whether the hands should look this way. I can't say, everybody stop while I whisper to the roll. So I'm speaking with double tongue the whole time. Gets very tense, very exciting, and you're all the time clouting yourself on the ear roll because I muffed that one, or Jane isn't hearing, so how can I help her hear this time, you see? And so she's in process of becoming. And I hope this isn't too boring, but I'm trying to stress the things that I feel are very important. So you've got the captain's the facilitator, the crew is the client, and the role is the ship as it moves into the thing. Now, around every role is a great domain of possibility. Is this Maid Marian the person who doesn't know how to make a home in a forest? Is that the aspect of the domain? Making a home no matter where you find yourself to be. Because we always relate back to the mundane. Or is Maid Marian, one of the areas of the domain is how the heck do you keep clean under circumstances you're not familiar with? Like if you're going camping, as Maid Marian certainly is. How do you keep your clothes clean if you've not access to the normal washerwoman, laundress that presumably this Maid Marian might have? How do you let people know where you are? All these are part of the domain of Maid Marian. And every role we make has this enormous potential of domains. What we have to select is the domain that makes us say, Maid Marian is the one we need for this. And this is how we shall take this part of the domain, but all the other areas are available. Now you see Maid Marian has 3 little books. Would you just hold them up there? One of the domains that interested you, who sent notes to me via Jane, was the business of literacy. So I've given Maid Marian 3 rather beautiful books. They are 3 ballet stories. But I know in this mode, at some stage, Maid Marian, through me, at the time I judge, will comfort herself with a story. Now I've chosen modern ballet stories. They are not weak stories. They are a little bit outrageous, but they are full of human passion. She is not a little girl. So they are not that Red Riding Hood's a little girl's story, but people think it is. So at some stage, the fact that she is literate, but may be a little too upset to choose the one that she needs, will allow me to see who can read, who will read, who sees books as natural in any group. So a role is a diagnostic factor all the time. She also has a letter from Robin. I want to know who finds reading natural, who doesn't bother with reading, but who could read if they wanted to, and so on. Just recently, in Birmingham, I was working with some 8-year-old children. Most of them were either Indian, Pakistanis, Asians of one sort or another, about 15 different local languages in that classroom. And the staff of the school said, I should warn you that they were nervous about my material, and I could appreciate that. I should warn you that you've got Muslims, you've got this, that and the other, you know, and many of them don't read well. And yet, you see, when that class started working, because they were off guard, they were dealing with a role, they were dealing through a role, they read Mary Morgan's Gravestone straight off, and everybody read it aloud, and it's a 6-foot-high gravestone with a very long story and very complicated words. And they could discuss the word suffered, spelled oddly, as gravestone cutters often do. And they were discussing whether, if you were 17 and you suffered, and these are 8-year-olds, and they were Muslim, if you're 8-year-olds and if you're 17 years old and you suffered, you could have been raped, you could be a bastard, you could be, I mean, I'm thinking myself at 8 and what I wouldn't have known. And the staff are beginning to say, we've totally misunderstood these children in terms of their reading. I'm not talking now about rape and child abuse, which is what they were on about, of course, as well. But they were all reading complex law documents. And they weren't abashed, because, you see, in the circumstances of the drama, well, if we're going to help Mary Morgan get sorted out, we'll have to see what this is. And this is what often will happen. The off-guardness creates understanding that people just didn't know people could do. The result is, you see, they've changed their teaching in that classroom, because that, you know, she's a sensible teacher anyway.